Hello and welcome back to TNWKS, the Now We Know show, the show where we discuss a topic of interest, and by the end we will have learned something new, and hopefully you will too. I'm Zak.
And I'm Buzz, and in this week's show, we're talking about board games.
Board games?
Are board games, boring people?
Are they a thing of the past?
Are they a thing of the past, or are board games the new retro way of enjoying
they making
a
a
Sunday
comeback?
afternoon?
Yes.
Exactly. That's what we're going to be talking about. So here we are back in the studio.
Oh, yes.
Talking about board games.
Board games, yes.
But some board games can last a long time.
Which means you need a drink.
And I do like a coffee to pep me up.
Oh, yes. So if you fancy buying us a coffee, please find all the information you need
a tenuous link
in the description below. It really supports the channel.
Yeah, please,
and
guys.
Every little helps.
You
we
guys
want to
are
make
awesome.
more content for you, and thank you very much.
Yeah, buy us a coffee. You guys are awesome, and we need that caffeine now.
Caffeine boost.
Especially if we're going to take on playing, should I say it, Monopoly. But
Dun,
that's
dun,
something for later on, that is.
Oh, wow.
But let's start this show off with our usual weekly spot of...
Weird and Wonderfuls.
What's the Weird and Wonderful?
So,
you've got something.
I've got some.
Woohoo! I like that.
It's not very long.
Okay.
But
is that a
it's an
clue?
interesting story.
Okay, it's a little story you heard, is it?
Kind of.
Okay.
I spotted it on social media.
Okay.
Okay, so Japanese woman
Okay.
uses hand grenade
Okay.
for 20 years as a hammer.
Is this a live hand grenade?
This is a German stick grenade.
Oh,
I've got one of those around here somewhere.
Oh, yes, you
Somewhere
have.
in the studio.
But for those
It's just
watching,
off screen.
It is a dummy, so
Yes.
it's not.
Yeah.
I'm scanning the studio.
I'm scanning.
now.
I can see
There's something.
lots of
if I,
lightsabers.
If I saw the end of it, I'd be able to spot it. There's Tomfers over there.
It's not. It looks like a hammer. Okay.
Okay.
Well, it could be confused as a hammer.
I suppose if the paint's worn off the end, which is the explosive bit,
The
then,
picture, it was very rusted.
Okay.
And
she's been basically using it as a hammer for doing her DIY job.
So as far as the story goes, actually I can see it's over in the corner behind the Millennium Falcon. Over in the corner. It's behind everything.
Okay.
You're not going to be able to see it.
Not going to get it.
But the story goes that she was just using it day to day in her garden, doing some kind of gardeny thing. And somebody wandered past
and recognised
an onlooker and recognised it as, that's
interesting.
That's an odd shape. And obviously recognised it and identified it as a German stick grenade, to which it was subsequently identified as such. And the fact that it was obviously live and had been used for 20 years as a hammer.
That's pretty weird.
That's a sticky situation.
Yeah, just that one wallop and kaboom.
Well, that's the thing. Don't they find unexploded
ordnance all the time,
rockets and torpedoes and things all over the place?
Yeah, I mean, we're, as you know, based in the UK, and we have a huge amount of construction stuff going on, and when they start digging the foundations for things, it's quite a regular thing. They come up with bombs. In fact, I think there was some gentleman, a lady and gentleman, which had a bomb which was live, and it'd been sitting outside their cottage as a sort of an ornament in their front garden for a number of years.
Oh, wow.
And they'd been literally every year they'd been painting it, and she used to stand on it to clean the windows downstairs.
Well,
until somebody again walked past and said, "Isn't that a World War II German bomb?" And then everything had to be evacuated.
Well, that's the thing.
The bomb
these
squad came.
things are taken so seriously that entire kind of areas have to be evacuated for sometimes days on end.
There was one down the Docklands in London or something a while ago.
You know what? I wouldn't be surprised.
They had to barricade it all off and shred it. But a lot of the time, if they can move them, they put them on a boat and take them out to sea and detonate them out to sea.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there are. I mean, that's the thing. It's
all leftovers, isn't it, from like World War II and things?
Can you imagine the amount of ordnance that is dropped all across Europe?
I mean, that said, how would a German stick grenade?
Well, the Japanese were in league with
World
War II,
yeah,
so
okay.
They probably swapped a few things around.
Okay.
Here, have a grenade. I'll have a samurai sword. I think the guy with the samurai sword probably came off tops on that one.
Anyway.
But there you go.
It's a fun story, a scary story.
Scary story, really, but thankfully,
shocking story.
Thankfully, it turned out well in the end.
Yes, not explosive.
Anyway, on to this week's subject: board games. Now,
Games.
this is very interesting, and it's a subject that we've been sort of toying with for a while, and we have an array behind us.
Yes, a nice display for those watching on YouTube.
Yeah. The thing is, board games. Well, I think we need to go right back to the beginning. So,
you brought this topic up, didn't you?
I've got a topic. That means, am I the first person to have a factoid with a new?
We finally have the horn.
Horn.
We have the horn. It finally arrived from Cheswan Province.
Cheswan. I need to put my. Careful where I stick that horn. Anyway, yes. So, factoid.
Go on.
The Royal Game of Yes, the Royal Game of is the oldest playable board game in the world, originating around 4,600 years ago in ancient Mesopotamia. The game's rules were written down on a tablet by a Babylonian astronomer in 177 BC.
Wow.
And as far as we know, that's the oldest game.
That's UR.
The Royal Game of
I'd be interested to play that. I wonder if they've done any recent updates.
So there you go, factoid.
You're going to get too carried away with that. I can sense it now.
Well, there you go. I'll put it down.
So, okay.
So board games are something that have been intrinsically part of humans' way of entertaining themselves for thousands of years. Coming forward in time, in Europe we've got things like Hafataffel, which is the Viking, known as the Viking game, which is a bit chess-like, and of course, chess, I believe, developed in China, and you've got Chinese checkers, and there's board games, just literally
all over the place,
loads of different ways you play games. It's just even using sort of like simple things by marking out, like I think the Americans would call it tic-tac-toe, but we call it noughts and crosses.
Yeah,
where you literally.
I thought that was a different game.
Tic-tac-toe. No, tic-tac-toe.
Wow,
I'm sure it's noughts and crosses.
There you go.
Correct us if I'm wrong. But yeah, you would just literally draw the grid in the dirt and just use stones, and
the board is
you only need two things, don't you?
Yeah,
sort of like stones and walnuts or something like that, so you can discern which is which. So there you go. So board games have been around for thousands of years, and have been very popular. In fact, I think the oldest board game that we own, I got that for you as a gift at Christmas last
that's
Christmas.
it. Yeah. Was that Mastermind or is it the other one?
No, Mastermind is the 1970s. That was an original as well. We're going to come on to the 1970s, but that was, I think it was a 1908 Peggit or something.
Peggotty.
I
saw it when I was setting up this background. I saw it and I was tempted to bring it in.
I was so
tempted.
I was so pleased to find that, because it's original in its box. I think it's 1908, all complete.
It certainly shows signs of its age.
Peggotty, yeah, but it's just fantastic artwork on the box.
Oh, definitely.
And we haven't gotten around to playing that yet.
Especially with other forms of like physical media and things that we've got nowadays, it's like redundant physical media almost, with like laser discs, CEDs. That is something that I've come to really appreciate, is the artwork and the design of a certain thing, more than potentially its function, because I can't play Laserdiscs. It'd be great if we could, but at the moment I don't.
We don't have the player.
A player. So perhaps that's an interesting comparison, as if like VHS they're kind of a redundant physical media format now.
Yep.
Would you say that
board games
are like a form of entertainment? Redundant entertainment when compared to like the likes of like a PlayStation.
Well, this is part
of the electronic game.
I see where you're going with this. I can see where you're going with this, and this is part of the discussion, because of course, and again, let's go through the history of it a little bit. Because obviously we've had, as we just said, right from the Royal Game of all the way through thousands of years, playing chess and all sorts of different other board games, drafts and whatever. I'm coming up to my childhood, 60s and 70s, and that was the entertainment. Board games were the thing. We didn't have electronic games. So right up until, I'd say, the late 70s, board games were still in the height of fashion, because especially when it came to Christmas, because at Christmas you always used to get adverts for like the board game companies, like Hasbro, and people trying to think of some other.
You got Frustration.
Who's the one who producing Monopoly? I can't think off the top of my head, but they'd always either with Monopoly they've kept that alive by reinventing it, the same game, but changing it to fit in with
a theme.
Because like I picked up the Lord of the Rings Monopoly,
which is the best. I'll say the number one version of Monopoly.
I have to say I played Monopoly when I was a kid back in the 70s, and yes, it can turn into two things: a very long game, and if you got annoying family members that ruin it, it can be arguments and all sorts.
Yeah.
And the Lord of the Rings one was actually a really good version.
It was refreshing, actually.
It was refreshing. I liked all the Lord of the Rings references and little figures and everything, but also it was really good because you had the one ring which moved around the board
to Mount Doom.
So every time you rolled it, if you got the Eye of Sauron, the ring would move one square. So the game was over when it got to the Mount Doom.
Yep.
And that was it. So and whoever had the most money in property wins, type thing. So that actually I enjoyed that because it had a kind of time limit on it. But anyway, let's take it back to the 70s. So you had this time where board game, there wasn't an option. It's board games. That's what you had. There were no. I remember I can't remember what date it was. Whether it was the beginning, it must have been nearly the end of the 70s, possibly the beginning of the 80s. When my dad bought our first electronic game, which was one of the TV tennis.
Oh,
where you had a little dial that you turned to make the thing go up and down.
Was that just called Pong or something?
Yeah, Pong. I think it was Pong. So you had that, and I remember the console that we had also had a light gun with it. So it had like playing clay pigeon shooting on the TV screen. However, prior to that, so you're thinking thousands of years of humanity have only been playing board games, okay? Until that time where we have the crossover to electronic games.
Yeah.
So let's just stick with my childhood for a moment, because a lot of people listening to this and watching this will relate to this. So you had that thing where every Christmas you had new things, and you're always looking for the new games. Classic games that we always played, of course, were things like chess.
Yeah.
Chess, dominoes, snakes and ladders, and what's the other one?
You got to be a bit more specific. Frustration?
It was Frustration, but the original Frustration. I can't think of the name of it. You guys are screaming at me out there in listener land.
Honestly, this is a podcast about board games. We should know these things.
Well, I haven't played this since I was a kid. Yeah, because it'll come to me. Anyway, but you had 4 coloured squares on it with a route around, and you chose a colour, and you had to get your pieces all the way around the board and then to the centre.
Right.
To win it, and I can't think of what it's called off the top of my head, but Frustration is based on it.
Okay.
So you had these standard games, and then you had other types of games that would come out yearly, which were like, oh, what's this going to be? And some of them were awful.
What was the one where it's like the yellow and red discs you put into the kind of...
Oh, that's Connect 4.
Connect 4.
Yeah, so you had those kind of... I think what it was is, if you classify those as kind of vertical board game, I suppose.
Gravity games.
Because you had things like Mousetrap. Yeah, they'd start to become more and more inventive with board
complex,
games. To appeal to children more. So you'd have like Mousetrap, where you'd have to put this like construction of this wonderful rig that if you landed on the wrong thing, you set the ball rolling and it would roll, and all sorts of different things would happen, and the cage would come down.
Well, that's all good and fun. But I remember there's one that we've got somewhere, and I don't know if it's all complete at the moment, but wasn't it called like Rumble in the Jungle? The setting up, it was like kind of like Jungle Run type of thing.
Okay.
But the setting up of it took far longer than the actual playing of the game.
Yeah.
To kind of get these like rolling like balls and things.
Yeah.
And, like traps and things going all over the place.
I mean, there was,
and you've got to rely on all these things to work when they have to work.
And of course, inevitably, I think maybe the manufacturers kind of had an idea that knowing kids, they're going to lose bits.
Yeah.
And once you lose bits, you can't play the game.
You got to get another one.
The game ends up. Back then, not a car boot sale, but back then it would have been a jumble sale or in the bin or something like that.
In the cupboard. Never to
be seen again. We had the other ones like Ludo.
Ludo.
Was it Ludo? I'm thinking of
Ludo's the thing from Labyrinth.
Yeah. I'm sure it was Ludo.
Cluedo.
No, not Cluedo. Ludo.
Okay.
Ludo. So anyway,
it's Ludo.
Ludo is like Frustration.
Okay.
Yes, Ludo. Anyway, got there in the end. Anyway, so you've got all these different board games that were classics, as I say, like chess and things, and then they brought out kind of yearly, trying to, like you had the initial battleships.
Yeah.
Where you had literally just pieces of paper and you marked out where your battleships were on it, and you had to maybe put a screen between you and your player, and then you'd call out what square you think that they might be on. Oh, it's going to be A5. Is that a hit or a miss? But of course, then that developed from that to when the electronics started coming out. So sort of from the paper, it then went to like fold out plastic ones with pegs. Put pegs in.
Yeah.
And then it went to like electronic battleships. And of course, eventually it ends up being on a computer console, And so you kind of think that for the heyday of board games lasting for so many thousands of years, that suddenly we hit I'm going to say the 1980s, when we start getting handheld electronic games. And of course, I can't remember the year that Nintendo brought out the Game Boy, but that was like the big thing. I mean,
well, I remember it must have been in the early 2000s when I got the Game Boy Advanced SP. Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
But from that point, I remember things like the Sega Master Systems and our friend Chaz obviously had the Amiga, the Commodore 64, and things like this.
Now this is before me, you see. Yeah. This is before me.
and a lot of cartridge games. I mean, I love the cartridge games. And of course now we've gone PS1, which I bought into when that came out. PS2, PS3, PS4.
We didn't PS4.
No, we didn't PS4.
We skipped PS4 and went straight to 5.
So now you've got, and then recently our TV blew up. And so we changed we've got a new TV, a new smart TV, and it found it's got a games channel on it that you can link up your PlayStation controller to the TV.
Well, it's
via Bluetooth, and you can play games on the TV.
How
it's like crazy.
Entertainment, physical media, and all these things. That's kind of where, on that kind of electronic side, where the crossover kind of happens. And now you see, obviously, we've got the option to like play it direct on a TV. These things, simple or complex, it's very much a similar conversation when we're talking about physical media in comparison to board games.
So the board games kind of, you could say they kind of died a death as soon as electronic games took a grip of people's imagination. And you don't see adverts. I mean, I can't even remember the last time I saw a board game advert.
Not really. You would normally see them around Christmas.
Yeah, but I can't. I can't say. Possibly on static adverts on social media feeds. You might see something if somebody's doing a startup or something like that.
Yeah.
But mainly, if it's proper adverts on the TV, it's nowadays it's promoted to have things like the Wii and these portable game systems that show a family in a house from grandmother and grandfather down to the grandchildren. Everybody's having a wonderful time playing Super Mario Kart, and it's like you are living in a perfect life because you've got an electronic console that you can take anywhere in the back of the car or whatever. And meantime, everybody else is looking at their phones. So are the board games dead?
Well, I wouldn't say that, because obviously, again, going back to physical media, I love physical media. Think about vinyl. That's still around. Yeah, that is very much a
vinyl sales, as far as I believe, rocketed.
They've rocketed. They're probably the best they've ever been. And I'm like,
well, certainly from the heyday.
From the heyday, yeah. What? Why? Why is that? Obviously, there's a market for it.
Yeah, there's a market. Now, I'm going to use a word that you're going to hate. I think board games have become very sort of boutique. Like they use that for boutique Blu-rays and things. And when I say that, there are specialised shops.
Much like a distributor.
Yeah. You can go to these specialised shops, like what's the one where you get the Warhammer 4000 stuff from?
Games Workshop.
Games Workshop. Yeah, places like that, and there's lots of other ones. And I noticed that also you can go to shops, kind of like games cafes, really, which have shops inside them, and you can go there, have a coffee, and they've got loads of tables and play games. So yeah, I think what it is board games haven't died a death, and I don't think they've gone underground either.
No,
I think that they are holding their own to a certain degree.
Yeah, because it's that level of having like a physical thing in front of you instead of like a controller. I think,
but I do think now this is probably my personal opinion on this. But I actually think the way that families interact now has changed, because the amount of times I've been to family get-togethers, or with just general say parties where you've got friends and guests, loads of people are just staring at their phones, or not interacting with each other. When you get a board game, it's a case of all have to interact together.
You've got a challenge. You've got a quest.
And I think a lot
to do.
I don't know if kids today actually know what that's like, because do their parents say, "Hey, let's play a board game," or is it let's get on the computer and have
it's very much that kind of personal experience, isn't it?
Whereas when I was a kid, it would be a standard thing that, especially at Christmas, you play board games. But also it also became the kind of trope that if you got the board game out, it meant everybody was going to end up with a raging argument.
Well, comparable to the modern gaming online, of course, is where everyone goes to be sociable. It's to play with Tommy 2 streets away. You play across the online networks.
Oh yeah, so you could be playing a friend down the road, or you could be playing a stranger the other side of the world.
Exactly.
In an instant.
Yeah. Okay. And you're all having chats, lobby conversations and things, all these types of deals. But again, you do see these same kind of arguments forming, especially in like the online chats and things. It can be brutal because it's like a faceless voice.
Yeah.
But
that's just like social media in general, isn't it?
Well, yeah.
If you post
again the crossovers
if
here,
you have an opinion on a subject and you put it on social media, you'll be shot. You know you're going to get shot down.
Yeah.
People will take the opportunity to basically punch down on anybody they can.
Well, it's the anonymity, isn't it?
Because it's faceless people. Whereas with a board game, you're sitting in front of people around a table, face to face. And do you know? I think it's a really healthy way of social interaction, a board game, and I actually think that people should play more board games. But anyway, we've got an array of board games that be behind us.
Oh yeah,
some of these date back. I mean, over that side I can see a 1990s Gladiators, for example.
I remember one from very early on us playing board games. I think it's something that's always been in our house, and that is Tomb of Doom behind you.
Tomb of Doom.
Gotta love Tomb of Doom.
Tomb of Doom was always a good fun one.
When it has batteries.
But again, that's one of those things. It's got little parts and it has batteries, and if you lose the batteries, whereas something as basic as playing chess, as long as you've got all the pieces, and you can always supplant one for a
Well, that's something that certainly is a thing for me. I think there is a point where a board game can become too complex.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
It loses that enjoyment because it requires everyone to be on the same page to be able to play it functionally, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if a board game is the actual rule book is like a half an inch thick, and you have to keep referring to it all the time.
Yeah,
it's hard enough playing something like Cluedo when and then people say, "Oh, that's not how we play it," or "That's not," and you get little differences in how people play things. And it's funny that's what causes arguments. And you just reminded me of a little story. I've got a friend of mine called Les, and he always used to tell me about the rivalry between him and his brother-in-law.
Oh yeah.
And at weekends they'd have get-togethers, and it really made me laugh, this one. I've got to say, Les is a Jehovah's Witness, and this plays a part in this. And so they were always having social group meetings, and their favourite game at the time was Trivial Pursuit, because it was when Trivial Pursuit came out.
Oh, so right from the heyday, yeah,
from the heyday of Trivial Pursuit. So they go and play this, but him and his brother-in-law were like always real hot rivals. They must win the game. And I remember Les coming in,
I love that.
coming into work and telling me about, you won't believe what happened. He was playing at the weekend with his brother-in-law and the family, and they're playing Trivial Pursuit, and Les has got he's got all his wedges. It's the question, so they pull out a question, and the question was, what's the 12th sign of the zodiac? And I'm sure it's Aries, but anyway, he says Aries, and then his brother-in-law said, no, we take those questions out of the box because they're satanic. And then they had this big argument about the questions.
That's ridiculous.
And then Leslie say, no, this is Trivial Pursuit. It's general knowledge. So it's just like general knowledge of the world. And he's going, no. And then the whole thing just descended into chaos.
That is hilarious. But again, those types of games, of course, you can update them with like modern questions and things. But you find that now they're very much themed like Monopoly to kind of keep
didn't we have a Lord of the Rings?
Recurring
Lord of the Rings again. Didn't we get a Lord of the Rings?
Lord of the Rings. I have got a Doctor Who Trivial Pursuit, but I will warn everyone to not play the Harry Potter Trivial Pursuit with me, because somehow I don't know. I'm not the biggest of Harry Potter fans. I am in Harry Potter, but
yes, you were teenage Aberforth Dumbledore, if I recall.
Yeah, Aberforth Dumbledore. I've got my wand.
It's
holding up Hero Quest, okay?
Yes,
but I kick ass at that. I played it at Christmas once, and since then, nobody's wanted to play with me.
Well, okay, so what you're saying is that I've given an example of people descending into chaos and arguing because of abrasion over questions. You're saying that obviously nobody wants to play with you because they go, oh no, Zak's
it's because it's hot topics like Doctor Who. Like I'm pretty clued in on that.
Yeah,
you're so knowledgeable on a specific
subject
or fandom or whatever.
But that's why the companies sell the products, though, isn't it?
Exactly. I suppose you'd have to kind of find yourself within like somebody either not knowing that you're so knowledgeable on a certain subject, or you're all similarly like clued in.
Well, I suppose that's when I like games which are more equal, because if you play something, there was a game from the 80s which was a board game called Masquerade, which was basically
is that the one we've got downstairs?
Yeah, it took me ages to I've got the original one, thankfully. I never lost it, but I think you have to search eBay high and low if you want to copy of Masquerade. But that's basically charades, and the thing is with charades, it's down to the individual's ability to be able to gesticulate and get across what
was that?
Gesticulate. Because you're not allowed to obviously to say any words or mime any words. You've got to mime your way through. So it's kind of a more of an equal game, and I know that they've kind of had little variations on that. It's like I think Rapido and things where you had to make things out of dough.
Oh,
and you have to guess what
crikey!
Which is a kind of a similar way to doing charades.
Is it kind of like Pictionary? Pictionary a bit.
Yeah, I suppose because you draw a picture, you have to draw it, and whoever has to guess what it is. And Masquerade, I love that one because it was really obscure things, very much kind of not as rude, but as obscure as Cards Against Humanity, if you're familiar with playing that, which is that's a hilarious game. If you're playing adult versions, I think you played the kiddies one, and it was.
You know what? Don't play Cards Against. I think Cards Against Children or something. But that was
awful.
That was bad. I had to play that for like a weekend every night for a few hours with like a big group of people, and I'm like, this would be so much more funny if it was the proper version.
It was the adult version.
They were kind of people very set in their ways on that particular occasion. But hey, I made the most of it. I enjoyed it for as much enjoyment as I could have had.
So I suppose really when it comes to board games, you've got board games which you're going to play one-on-one competition, such as chess.
Yep.
Okay, head to head. But most board games kind of want to bring in a group. And I think probably board games, although obviously now they're going head to head with electronic games and with playing across the net, as you say. What do you call these
online networks?
Online networks. Probably the most popular games are the ones that take groups of people. Yeah, I mean, obviously, chess.
Do you want to explain that a bit more?
Well, chess is still a really one-on-one game.
It's like a head-to-head.
And you have world championships in that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to board games that maybe you play in the household, now they've become more games where you invite people round as a general get-together. Like, yes, you would have a dinner party. You have a games party. So I think...
Games night, yeah.
A games night. But it's those types of games where it's led by somebody.
Well,
so because you hear a lot of people playing things like Dungeons and Dragons, which is led by a person.
But I've got to kind of step in there when you mention that, because unfortunately Dungeons and Dragons it's far too complicated. It doesn't need to be as complicated as it's made out to be. And if you play with somebody and you discover you're not doing the correct thing, and then you ask questions, you're breaking character, and then people get arsey with you.
Right, so we're getting back to that
I think
abrasiveness of a
honestly, I think I've just played Dungeons and Dragons with the wrong people.
Yeah, well,
but there are alternatives out there which you can see in the background
that's kind of
if you're watching YouTube.
Well, if you're not watching YouTube, maybe we should have a commercial break.
Okay,
we're talking about
Hero Quest. Deep inside another dimension, face battling barbarians and evil magic on a quest or adventure in a maze of monsters. This is Hero Quest, the fantasy adventure game where winning means mastering the arts of combat. I use my broadsword and magic. Fire of Wrath! Once you play Hero Quest, you will never be the same again. Now featuring 2 adventure packs, the quest continues.
Batteries not included. I was waiting on the end of that one. I think that needs a...
Yay!
Well done, Zach. You've memorised that advert.
Marketing done right.
That's it. That is marketing done right for the company who made that
Hero
advert.
Quest is completely an outstanding game. I love Hero Quest.
I have to say, I played Hero Quest when it was originally came out, and it was small cardboard things. And I think that's one of the things with the group board games these days, because a lot of the big group board games like Warhammer 4000 and Hero Quest and some of the other ones as well, which we got Horrified there. They and the what was the Colonial Marines one?
Aliens, Another Glorious Day in the Corps.
Core.
Where's this? I don't get that. Core would be CORE.
Okay, don't worry.
But then it's CORP. I would always pronounce that Corp.
Yeah, fair enough. Anyway, back to the thing. So, but they come with little figures.
Yes.
Okay. No, I don't want to go off tangent too much.
Some assembly required.
Yeah, don't want to go off tangent too much. But the thing is, because they come with the figures, it's created a whole other kind of industry as well, because people paint the figures, they build their armies, and they do things.
Well, let's just say for Hero Quest, we're working on it.
Yeah. Well, with Hero Quest, and I'm going to plug this because it was an old game that I played and I absolutely loved it, and then you've become introduced to it. And
I've taken the Zargon role in my stride.
You're the one who leads it, and this is the thing, because with a game like that, the rules aren't strict, and they're not hugely this is not a huge learning curve
as a comparison to Dungeons and Dragons, because the comparisons are they're similar games, but they're poles apart. Rulebook for Hero Quest, all you need to know, if anything, is tiny, how much would you...
half a dozen pages.
Half a dozen pages to get the entire rules of Hero Quest, and you're sorted, and you can play it for hours.
Yep.
Dungeons and Dragons, depending on which version you're playing, could it be the 2015 edition? I don't know, because the rules are different, apparently. But you have to buy a 60 quid rulebook that's 2 inches thick.
No, yeah. Well,
you've got to keep buying it again and again as new editions are released.
I call it making a mistake myself. I did buy the easy-to-play version, which came with a free poster of a dragon. Ooh.
Have we still got the poster of the dragon?
I think we got the poster of the dragon. But again, when I got it out, the rule book in it was huge. And then you had to... I went through sort of half a dozen scenarios, and then it said, by the time you got so far, you will then start to be able to play the game. And it's this is just too complicated. Well, now, I'm sure there's people out there listening to this that go, I don't know what you're talking about. It's very easy. But Hero Quest, that is a top game when you want a group of people. Because the thing is, you got to think about your game...
It's playability,
players,
isn't it?
Because the players can come into
If you can just drop into a game of Hero Quest, I would say that is a really good thing. All fine and well if Dungeons and Dragons is your thing, but I would say a easier, more playable version of a fantasy game like that is Hero Quest.
Yeah, and that's when it becomes that enjoyable part. And because
I think one has got to kind of initially from a young age, you're kind of very much, I want to win.
Yeah.
Type of deal. Whereas I think over the years I have slowly discovered that it's not necessarily about the winning. You've got to learn to enjoy the game.
Yeah, that's core surely to any game though.
Exactly.
I think overcomplicating the game is a sure way of killing it. And having to keep going back and referring to the rule book all the way through a game is a way of killing it. And it's a way of losing people's interest in the game.
Well, Okay. A good example of this is actually Tina. You played or tried to play games such as, if I look behind me, we've got Monsters Menace America behind us. Now, I remember trying to play that with Tina, and she just wasn't getting the rules.
Oh, that was the one that's kind of based on Godzilla time.
Godzilla-like things.
Is that the one with the aircraft and
and the military as well? You play a monster and the military, and you have to kind of
and it became too confusing.
Yeah, exactly, and that's where some people can tune out of games.
Yeah, you don't really want that. I think that's where you want to be in that sweet spot when it comes to a board game, where you can learn very simply and quickly what the rules are, and the game itself is fun.
Yeah, but then there is also the other side, because I will say that I'm not a stranger to the more complex games. One that immediately pops to mind on this front is a game I've played several times with Jack, and to be honest, we're due another playthrough. And that is War of the Ring, which is
I've heard you talk about it.
Lord of the Rings board game, which encompasses all of Middle-earth, all the armies from all across the free peoples of Middle-earth, elves, the humans, the dwarves, the Rohirrim, and the hobbits. Hobbits, anyway.
They're taking the hobbits to Isengard. To Isengard.
You have to recreate the movie.
The hobbits to Isengard.
What did you say? You have to recreate the movie, and obviously one person plays Sauron's forces and Saruman's or whatever, and somebody plays the good guys, and it's quite a complex game, and it does take a lot of setting up, because there are lots of miniatures. I'm not talking a small amount of miniatures. I'm not talking Hero Quest level of miniatures. I'm talking a lot of miniatures. That's more than Hero Quest.
Well, just in Hero Quest, you have basically 4 combatant figures, don't you?
4 combatant figures, and then all the monsters.
Yeah, but the guy who's controlling the game controls the monsters.
Exactly.
So that's easy enough to deal with.
Whereas it's a lot of things in War of the Ring to kind of get your head around, and cards as well, and things have to be done in a certain way. The kind of switch off on it is when anyone ever brings up the political track.
Right.
You've got to get your different settlements to a kind of war footing to kind of be able to dispatch troops and things. Okay. Which is where a lot of people kind of tune out when playing that.
It's already sounding complicated.
Exactly. That's because it is. But what my point is, you can get your head around it if you persist. And it does take trial and error, of course, to learn these things.
I would actually like to jump in there and say that, again, with the popularity of board games having to go head-to-head against electronic computer game consoles these days, surely one downside to board games that you've just described is you've got to have a gaming table of some sort, big enough, it sounds, to take that kind of game.
That is very true.
And I think a lot of people would be hard pressed these days. To
like
have that sort of
sometimes a dining room table just doesn't cut it.
If you're talking a dining room table doesn't cut it.
Yeah. It doesn't help the playability there, does it?
No, it doesn't help the playability. I was asked from friends that were trying to find a room big enough to play their Warhammer 4000 game, and I think they needed like 3 or 4 6-foot by 3-foot tables to put together to do this, which is an amazing thing, and I'd love to see how you play it.
It'd be a great podcast to do one specifically on that.
Yeah, on Warhammer.
That was
Warhammer 4000 or 40,000.
I don't. It's had several iterations.
I'm probably going to get told off for calling it the wrong name.
Well, we should get. It was Jack, wasn't it? Jack
Harris. Yeah.
Jack Harris. Yeah. Get him to do a podcast on it.
Again, to play a game like that's just like crazy space you've got to have.
There you go. Live commentary of Warhammer 40,000. That'd be cool.
I think for me, a game I want to be able to get it out and to not have to, every time I get a game out, read the instructions because I've forgotten how to play it.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons why I really love Hero Quest, because you can pick it up and the rules are so easy.
Well, again, to put that into perspective, and we're not doing an advert for Hero Quest here. Well, actually, you just did do it.
I could do it again. No, don't set me off. I can.
Don't say, give me that horn. I'll hit you with it. I wonder if that works. Yep, kind of. Anyway, so but with that, I hadn't played it for years. But then when you got it, it all just came back straight away.
Well, that's very interesting, because I have a memory. I think we only played it once and promised to play it again up with family up in Lincolnshire. We played the original board game, which obviously came out in the 80s. But I loved it so much, but at that point in time, this version of Hero Quest we've got behind me hadn't come out. It hadn't had its resurgence in popularity, and that came out in 2021. So we are talking that this new version of Hero Quest has only been around for a couple of years, and it has found enormous amounts of popularity
really big
across
traction.
the board. And we've had subsequent re-releases, new releases of like expansions and things that work straight into the game.
I was going to say these games have expansion packs, don't they? So you can kind of go beyond.
You can build it, build it up,
which was quite nice. But there are games that are really good and playable games which fall by the wayside because every kid loves dinosaurs, and I love that game we got called Impact, which was where you actually had a 3-dimensional landscape, and you had dinosaurs with actual firing rocket power.
Well, that was the big thing. It was like Impact, the game with real firepower.
Yes, and
I love that game. I think that was kind of a very good like little combat game, a little bit of strategy as well.
You could see how you could lose those rockets really easy.
You could call it like rocket chess. I like that.
Yeah, rocket chess. Yeah, that was good fun. But I
mean, and again with that, it only had the initial board game release, and then subsequently kind of like secondary expansion type thing, which I think was called the Battle of Wolf Ridge. But again, with that, you can kind of build it up as much as you want. You could have a massive kind of almost. It depends how many teams you got, but it's usually like a 1v1. But you could have teams, or I don't know, with some coloured stickers or something. You could have multiple
you could
armies.
Differentiate the armies apart.
Yeah, and that would be really interesting to kind of create.
So, with games as they stand at the moment, do you think board games are holding their own against electronic games? I think they're. I'm going to say it again. They're kind of more these days. I don't think that kids are particularly interested in getting a board game in their Christmas stocking. I think board games have become more of a niche market, but they are still worth playing.
Persisting, yes.
Board games.
I would, to be honest, I would really recommend board games on any level, really.
I don't think they're dead in the water. I mean, we started off, the whole point of this podcast was to have a discussion and decide whether board games are people bored of board games? That's
a good title. I like that.
Have they died a death, or are they something that really needs a new revival? And I think the revival is there. I just don't think necessarily the younger generations as they're coming through are actually.
You do see that a lot of these kind of boutique board games. I don't like the term, but you go to places like bookshops and things like Games Workshop or David's Bookshop we've got in Letchworth. They've got a massive board game section, and they hold board game nights there.
But do you think that they are kind of like your 30 plus age group?
Well, I'm actually involved on
I'm sure there's some younger people
Facebook group there, and it seems to be a pretty varied kind of group of people.
Okay.
But I think perhaps it's the upbringing. If a particular like parents or something weren't attuned to board games,
but that's what I'm saying,
or weren't brought up with board games to such a level, I would say that they wouldn't obviously then start with their kids.
Well, I grew up with them because that was all that was available. Thinking about our close friends like Chris and Eileen, who are renowned for having their games nights. Again, they're a little bit younger than me, but still of that generation where board games came before electronic games. I'm just wondering if the new generations that are coming along maybe are kind of missing out the opportunity to play and experience what it's like to have interaction in a way, rather than sticking the headset on and sitting on your gaming chair,
playing with
whoever from the other side of the world. That as exciting as that may be, the actual one-to-one communication, and you must sort of learn social skills playing board games as well.
Yeah,
I wonder if they do them at schools. Whether they actually get the children at schools to play board games against each other, in order to have social. You know what? Socialization.
On this note, that's just I'm casting my memory back to my days at school. I can't really say that I ever had board games to play at school.
When we got to the end of school term, the last day, usually everybody brought a board game in. And we used to sit at the desks playing board games.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, I like that. That's really cool.
Did you do that?
No, not really.
Oh, that was the thing, that everybody would bring board games in. And
no, sometimes you'd have like a fun day type thing.
Interesting.
It was mostly to do with no uniform days, non-uniform day. That's it. Type of deals, and sometimes you dress up as characters from whatever. I think my Levers day, I dressed up as Rambo. Took in a compound bow. That went down quite well. But not
no arrows.
Not the arrows. And somebody did try to confiscate my BB gun, which was odd. I just hid it. Anyway, long time in the past. But okay. Hang on, where were we going? I've lost my track.
We were doing board games, and I said about going to school and playing board games.
That was it. So the one memory I do have of board games when it comes to school is when we were given the task of design a board game.
Ah, right, okay.
Design a board game. And I remember, actually, odd comparison here, I made something that was like Horrified, the original Horrified. It was very much like you got your Dracula, your Wolfman, Universal Monsters type of vibe. It was a very straightforward game. I mean, you just had to roll the dice, move the pieces type of game. Oh no, you've landed on this, go back to the start type of thing. But I remember having a lot of fun kind of designing that. Yeah, well, and obviously everyone else did as well. I could see
how a project like that at school would be a great way of getting the kids to interact.
I can't remember if it was like a competition, like win tickets to like Alton Towers or something.
Do you think
that it was good fun.
Do you think they can still do that at school these days? Because do you think the school children actually know what a board game is in order to design a board game?
To be honest,
or is it more likely they're going to be on their tablets or whatever they use these days saying we design an electronic game?
I would probably not be surprised if that were the case. The tablets, because growing up, it was very much kind of on the beginnings of this kind of tech uprising. I remember having in the early 2000s, the big chunky computers that we still had to work with type things on and whatever. But now they're all going to be flat screen type of deals. I imagine it's going to be very tech orientated school.
Right. So to kind of round this off, a question I've been wanting to ask you. Obviously, you're younger than I am.
Okay.
But
is it HeroQuest related?
In your in your years of experience with playing board games, what are your top three?
Top three board games. That's a good question like that. Well, I'm going to start at the top of the list, and that is HeroQuest.
He's off again. Shall it?
Okay, you've stopped me. Okay, HeroQuest. That's a good question.
So if you didn't have HeroQuest, what would you go to next?
Well, I don't know. Could you reveal one of your top three first? Maybe spur some ideas.
Right. I'm going to kind of go classic and retro on this because I mean, I love HeroQuest, so that's going to be my top three. But one that I do cherish and I love the game is a game called Conquer Everest. Conquer Everest.
Oh,
and you have played that.
I've played that several times.
You threw up all over it, actually. Yes. Just to explain to the listeners, this Conquer Everest is a game I got, and I'm sure I must have got that in the 70s. And it had a collapsible Mount Everest. It's huge. It's this big pyramid mountain.
Yeah.
And you had to start off on this outer part of the board, going around, getting enough money for your expedition to Everest.
Yeah.
And before you could fly to Nepal. And then you had another route you had to go around, and you had to collect equipment. So you had to get enough Sherpas, enough ropes, and medikits and stuff. And then once you had enough to allow you to climb the mountain, then you had a little climber who had an ice axe.
Yeah.
And the actual pyramid mountain had little holes pierced into it, and so you could hook him into each hole as you went up the mountain. And you had several different routes to choose from: harder routes, which were faster, and longer routes, which were easier but longer. And then you might hit. They're brilliant because they had you've been attacked by the abominable snowman, which was great. But you would lose equipment, and if you I love that game, and I kept it, and it was in the attic, and I found it, and when you were a kid, we got that out.
Yeah.
and I hadn't played it for years, and we set it up. I was so pleased to find it, and then you subsequently halfway through the game threw up all over my mouth.
I can't quite remember why. I assume it was something I ate.
I think it must have been, but you threw up all over Mount Everest. thankfully, I have managed to. I did rescue it, but yeah. So Conquer Everest. Yeah, I think that one is my favourite retro game. So Conquer Everest and Mastermind. So I'll probably say Conquer Everest.
Oh, you're going for that. I was going to go for Mastermind.
Well, you were only introduced to the Mastermind about a year ago.
Yeah, I know.
It's such a simple game.
Yeah, but somehow it's really, really fun.
A logic and puzzle game that I just love it. So yeah, I think my top games would be Conquer Everest, for the sheer nostalgia, Hero Quest for the pleasure of playing with good friends and family.
Yeah.
Then again, a nostalgia one would be Mastermind.
Okay, so just to broaden the topics a bit, I would have put Mastermind up there because I remember I haven't played it much, but I've had good fun with that. But for the nostalgia, for me personally, I always remember playing Tomb of Doom that we've got behind you.
Oh yes, the Tomb of Doom.
That's always a good one. Great fun. I know it's got like little silly little activity type things in it. Because haven't you got to get like the right key to open the treasure chest?
Yes, you had to get the right key.
It's kind of like Indiana Jones, but without Indiana Jones, isn't it?
Otherwise, the skull would laugh at
you. Oh, great time. And probably another one. It's kind of, again, another team game where everyone's like working together, as opposed to like being 1v1 or anything, would be actually Horrified. We've had good fun.
That is a new.
We've had good fun with that,
yeah.
And I think they've actually brought out some newer ones, like they did American Monsters Horrified and Greek Myths.
If I had to say my top 5, then I would stick Horrified in there definitely, and I would also go back to Masquerade.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we've got literally like probably. I don't know.
Well,
how many games have we got?
We haven't got as many board games as a lot of our friends have got,
but we've got quite a collection. Yeah. And to be honest, I feel like we should probably play them a lot more. Yeah. But it's a time and organisation thing, isn't it? That sometimes.
Overall, what we'd like to also know is you guys listening and watching this podcast. What are your favourite games? What have you got to throw in the pot? Is there a game out there you'd recommend that we haven't mentioned? That you say, this is a must, give it a go?
By extension, obviously we have on the channel before kind of introduced board gamers, and we have played a couple of games here and there just to kind of see how doing a gameplay video on a board game works. As obviously we've done gameplay videos on the PS5 and such. We have done a couple of board games. It'd be interesting to see if you have any recommendations for games you'd like to see us play, potentially with a group. I know that Hero Quest is very high on that list of the board gamers playthroughs.
Hero Quest.
I think we just need to work out the logistics of actually recording that. I think that would actually be really good fun.
I think you need to have kind of multi-cameras on that one.
Well, that's the thing. It's kind of, you've got to have like the view of everyone playing it.
Yeah, but again, that comes down to having the space. We could certainly do that in the costume department because we've got room down there. But it's setting up all the cameras and everything.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a thing. It's a thing to put on the list.
So board games.
Yes, board games.
Are they dead? I don't think so.
Definitely not. No,
I think, but if
they're alive and kicking.
They're alive and kicking. And frankly, if you haven't introduced your children to board games, or you haven't got a board game out for a while, give it a go.
Give it a go.
Give it a go.
And if you do, let us know what you played.
That'd
be great. That'd be great.
Tell us. Give us a feedback. Anyway, that leaves me to round off with
Wisdom of the Week.
And I wanted to make it board gamey kind of wisdom.
Ah, lovely. Okay, I'm ready. Bestow your wisdom.
Right, let's put my Specto Specs back on.
Oh, hey.
Okay, so obstacles in life are like a game of chess. In order to win, it's not enough to be good. You have to be better.
Ooh.
There you go. Do you want me to repeat that one?
Go for it, yeah.
Obstacles in life are like games of chess. In order to win, it's not enough just to be good. You have to be better.
Yeah, that's very equatable to life.
There you go.
Yeah.
So,
Gotta rise to the challenge.
Is life a game of chess?
Well, there you go.
And do you need to move?
It's multi-dimensional chess.
Do you need to move your bishop to rook 4 in order to win or not? I don't know.
Anyway, if you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe to this channel and comment below any suggestions of topics or activities you'd like to listen to in future episodes.
One activity I'd like is to grab a coffee.
Oh, yes.
Yes, so if you fancy, help us out. I know we keep plugging it, please buy us a coffee.
It'd be absolutely fantastic. It's a very small
If
ask.
you do, we'll thank you for it.
Yeah.
Trust me.
No worries. We will mention your name, put it in the descriptions, and all that jazz.
Unless you want to donate a coffee
anonymously.
Anonymously. Oh, we both went for the horn.
There you go.
And there we are.
That's a massive dice rolling goodbye from Zak.
Ooh, you're using the dice tower, are you?
Oh, yeah. We didn't mention dice towers. We got that for here request.
Okay. That's a big bishop to king 4. Checkmate. Goodbye from Buzz.
See you in the next one.